Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be sharing with you the books that I have read that I read in August and the first part of September, or that I finished in the first part of September. I've been kind of MIA lately. Work has been crazy and I just did not feel like filming. So I'm a little behind on wrap-ups. One other thing that I did want to quickly talk about before I get into the books is I think that I'm going to start doing my wrap-ups a little differently. If you've seen Helene Jepsen's reading, I think it's reading vlogs, where she kind of wraps up her books as she goes during the month, I love this format. I feel like it gives an opportunity to really talk about each book right after you've read it, so when it's still fresh on your mind. And if I'm being honest, I hate filming wrap-ups because I have to sit down and look at the books and figure out what I read, make sure I don't forget anything, kind of go back over my thoughts on them. So I hate filming wrap-ups because I always inevitably forget something I want to say, or I just feel like they're not as effective as Helene's video where she talks about them right after she reads them. So I think I'm going to give that a try for the rest of September and into October and see how that goes. But meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and talk about these books while I've got them in front of me. So the first one is Thanks for the Trouble by Tommy Wallach, which was a book that I was really excited about. I didn't realize he was coming out with a new book or a second book, or it would have been on my most anticipated reads, but I actually didn't realize that it was coming out until it was already out, and I saw the Little Book Owls video interview with him, and he's hilarious, which is not surprising at all if you have read either of his books. So the first one we all looked up was my favorite book of 2015. It was spectacular. It was such a surprise for me because I just picked it up because I thought the cover was really interesting, and then I read the premise, I really liked it, and I just absolutely adored that book. I will link my review to it up here. But this book I was super excited about, and it was very much Tommy Wallach's style. His writing style is so fun and interesting, and this one was not as good as we all looked up, but I still thought it was really clever and interesting, and he kind of looks at kind of heavy topics, but in a approachable way, which I think is really great. I want to do a review of this or an author spotlight of Tommy Wallach because I really just think he is fantastic, and he has become one of my auto-buy authors because I love him. I actually flagged some places in this because they're such good quotes. Like, he has such incredible thought-provoking quotes that are just sort of like part of the narrative and part of the book and the conversations, but when you read it you think, wow, that's really smart and really incisive and insightful. That's really insightful. And so I'm always perpetually surprised by his books, and this one is about a boy who is kind of, he doesn't think he's popular. His dad died and he hasn't spoken, like actually spoken a word since his dad died, and so it kind of deals with those themes of mental health and anxiety and depression, and then it also kind of touches on family relations, and there's just like this interesting family dynamic between him and his mom. It's not one of those YA books where the parents aren't present. She's there. She's not super present, but there's a reason why she's not super present. And then he meets this girl in a hotel, and they have this interesting kind of relationship, and she's a really interesting character because you never are really sure if she's telling the truth. She's one of those like, she's not the narrator, but she's a kind of unreliable narrator. She's kind of the unreliable friend that moves the story along in this weirdly interesting way. I don't know, I'm getting way too in depth in this. Maybe I should just do a review on it, but yeah, if you liked We All Looked Up, definitely check this one out. And then in an attempt to get some things off of my shelf and pick out kind of like a quick fun read, and also because her new book has just come out or is getting ready to come out in the US. I'm not sure if it's come out in the US yet. I picked up Florida Force's The Glam Guide, and this is just like a really beautifully illustrated kind of lifestyle book. If you've read any of the Kate Spade books, she has this trilogy of, or trio of books that are kind of like style and home and kind of etiquette related. This reminded me a lot of that, and I feel like with the addition of her book coming out this year, or the one that's already come out, the Lux Life, I think it is, like the pair of them really speak to that kind of like Kate Spade aesthetic and that like Kate Spade, I don't know, it's not how to, but just interesting guidebooks. And there were some really nice tidbits in here, some things that I was like, oh, I never thought to do that, or, you know, that's a great idea. For me, as, you know, a 30-year-old woman, a lot of this is stuff that I have already experienced in my life or already do. There were definitely some tips for things that I was like, that's a really great idea, or I can improve, you know, my quality of life by doing that. But for the most part, I think this is aimed at a younger audience, so probably high school to college age girls, and I think it's great, and I think this is a really wonderful just sort of guide for girls growing up. I think Fleur is an amazing woman, and she has such great inspiring things to say, and she's very encouraging, and I hate to use the word role model, but if there ever was a YouTube role model, she is definitely that for, I think, entire generation of girls, because she's just, I don't know, she's so kind and just put together, but in that way that it's like she's not trying too hard and she's not fake, and I love that about her. So I was really enjoying reading through this, and I definitely will be picking up her second book because I love home stuff. That's one of my favorite things, and I think that her new book is going to be really right up my alley. So the next book is one that I was not planning on picking up this month, but it came in at the library. I had requested it and they ordered it, and I was the first one on the hold list, so I went and picked it up, and that was Rebel of the Sands by Alan Hamilton. And this book was one of the books that I had on my most anticipated reads of first quarter for this year, and I just had not, I wasn't really interested in buying it so much as I just wanted to read it because I wanted to make sure that it was something that was going to be up my alley, because I have just been kind of obsessed with like djinn lore and like djinn culture and just like the idea of genies and the djinn, and that kind of stemmed from reading The Golem and the Genie last year, and this definitely did not disappoint. So I read a book earlier in the year that was kind of Aladdin Jasmine retelling, and I thought that's what this was going to be as well. It was not, but it wasn't an Aladdin Jasmine retelling in the best possible way. It was this amazing story about this badass like female character who just, she was really kind of an interesting, complex character, and this is the first book in I think a trilogy, and I cannot wait for the next one to come out. It comes out in March and I'm dying for it. But basically she ends up leaving her tiny town with this foreign guy who has come into the town, and something happens. They end up kind of thrown into each other's path, and, you know, go off into the desert, and mayhem ensues, and it's just got some interesting looks into djinn lore, and it's also packed full of like just the right kind of YA action sequences. Like, they're not crazy ridiculous action sequences, but they're also intense in some parts, and it's just such a fun, exciting story that I am really looking forward to the next book. And I think I may do a kind of a review, like a 4 reasons why you might want to pick this book up, because I just was really impressed with it, and even more so than the Aladdin Jasmine retelling that I read earlier. And yeah, it was one of the better books I read this month. So then one of the books that I finished right at the beginning of September was Middlemarch by George Eliot, and I was reading this along with Rincy and some other people for the hashtag March Middlemarch Madness. I don't know why I can't say that. Hashtag Middlemarch Madness. And I finished it about 2 days later than we were supposed to. I was listening to it on audiobook, and the audiobook was really good, and I'm glad I did it that way. I started reading it just like as the book, and I don't think I would have gotten through it as quickly or really gotten as invested in it if I had been reading the physical book. But I was listening to it on audiobook, and I would just, like, anytime I was just sitting around or in my car, I would listen to it. And it's a huge chunky book, so I'm surprised I got through it as fast as I did, even with audiobook and it being on 1.2 times. But this is just kind of like a meandering story, the life of a handful of people from this town, Middlemarch, and I was genuinely surprised how attached I got to the characters. They're all really kind of flawed, and there were times when I really liked certain characters, and there were times where I was like, why did I ever like this character? And it just was like this interesting picture of just life in this time, because there was nothing overly like exciting that happened, but it was all very kind of, you know, small town scandal and the relationships between different families and how life kind of like meanders along. And it was very interesting, and I liked it, and I was really glad that at the end she has kind of a what happened to them later, to see kind of how their choices affected their lives and how they fared later on in life, and if they were happy with their choices. I thought that was a really great touch. So yeah, I really did enjoy this, and I will link Rincy's Middlemarch Madness videos for you to check out more about this if you are interested in reading it. And the last book that I read this month is one that I have been reading on for a while, and not because I wasn't enjoying it, but because I wanted to really savor it and really learn from it, because I feel like that is something that this book does really well, and that is Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And I was recommended this book by Elena of Elena Reads Books and Nina of SCS Reads. I always leave the second S out. I'm not really sure why. And I'm so glad that they recommended this to me. I had been interested in reading it, but I just kept putting it off. So I was glad that this was one of my BookTuber Recommends books, so that I could get to it sooner rather than later. And this book is amazing. So first of all, it's a very compelling read. Like, it's something you want to keep reading. Her writing style is easy to read and to get into. It has kind of like the shorter chapters with like sometimes chapter breaks and things inside of it. And there's also like some of her blog entries in there, and I liked the format a lot. It made it easy to read a lot of small chapters quickly, and I also really loved the two main characters, whose names I'm not going to try to say because I will butcher them, because I actually typed out the male main character's name, and then when I was looking at it I was like, that's not how it's spelled at all. I just read it that way, and that's not even close. So I'm not even going to try to say the names because I will butcher them. But their stories were really interesting just as stories, so as characters in a novel. I really wanted to know how their lives were going to turn out, and you know, how their paths might cross again eventually. And so that I really liked. But the bigger part of this, the part that really made this a book that I wanted to savor, is that it is so full. So it's full of character, it's full of lessons to be learned, it's full of knowledge to be had. I feel like before I read this book, I had an idea of what it really meant to have white privilege, basically, to be a white person in America. After reading this, I understand it in a different way, because there were some things in here that I just had never considered, or that I had thought about but not in the same way. And so I liked that it kind of brought to light some different aspects of culture, and I thought the American Black versus non-American Black kind of interplay or cultural differences were very interesting, because I went to a women's college and we had people who were from all over the globe kind of come to our university, and I remember seeing some of the kind of dynamics between people in our BSA and not really understanding it, and this kind of made me understand that in a different way. There's one part where she's in college and they're talking about, I can't remember the two, it's like the BSA and then another group that's like a cultural group, and they were saying like if you're a non-American Black, you don't go to the BSA. And it was just very interesting to see that written out by someone who is kind of an own voices perspective. So I really liked that, and I feel like I learned a lot from this, and I feel like especially in America right now, this is a really important read because I feel like it gives a perspective to some of the things that are going on in our society right now, politically and socially, and I'm really glad I read it, and I'm really glad I read it right now. Alright, so those are the books that I read in August and the first part of September. I am in the middle of like 4 books and 2 buddy reads right now, so we'll see how this new kind of like vlog style wrap-up format review as I goes. Hopefully I won't forget, but yeah, I am excited to try something different, and I will go ahead and link Helene's videos, a couple of them, if you want to check out the way that she does it, because I just think it's really great. And I am glad I kind of like saw that, and I hope she doesn't mind me borrowing her idea. I just think it's a great way to review and to wrap up the month, and yeah. That's about it. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!